Welcome to the Breaking News Bears podcast. I'm your host, Chris Capone, joined alongside my co-host, once again, Evan Davis. And being just a week removed from the trade deadline, there are still some players that were surprisingly not traded. While we discussed some last week, there are still some more to discuss, including possible deals that could be held at the winter meetings. We'll also be discussing upcoming free agents and some end of season award discussions, along with some other little tidbits that we'll be talking about. But first, Evan, I'll ask you. Which player do you think can make the biggest splash if they were to be traded during the offseason?
Oh, you look at the long list, and we talked about it numerous times, and a lot of other media guys have talked about it, but Ryan McMahon could really bring a team a World Series, and it could also bring the Rockies an absolute haul. And you look at the Rockies at the top of their prospect rankings with Chase Dollander and now newcomer Charlie Condon. They have really nice foundational pieces, and you also have one currently on the active roster in Ryan McMahon, who's nearing his age 30 season. He doesn't fit the timeline that the Colorado Rockies are on. And yes, you want veteran leadership in the clubhouse and on the field, but I just think with third base being such a premium position, especially a gold glove third baseman like Ryan McMahon, there are plenty of teams that would be at the door waiting to get their hands on a guy like him.
Yeah, you see with McMahon, and I know we discussed this last episode where the Rockies straight up said, we're not trading you. And I think that was just a huge mistake because he's on a great contract, 6 years, 70 million until the 2027 year. I just think an almost 30-year-old third baseman that is already such a hot commodity. They could have really made out like bandits at the trade deadline, especially being his best offensive year so far up to this point. I really think they could have gone on a huge haul for Ryan McMahon, but you know, they didn't end up going in that direction. Now, one other player that I think could end up, getting a really big haul for their respective team is Kevin Gausman. Now, if Gausman were to get traded, obviously he's had kind of a down year, and some of that could be due to injury coming into spring training. He only pitched one game in spring training. He had some lingering issues, but he's been more solid as of recently. If you can really say that. He had a complete game against Texas. But his home and away splits have been atrocious this year. And we've discussed this before, where his ERA at home is around seven,
Mhm.
above seven, and his ERA on the road is around two. And it's just such a weird, you never really see this much of a pitcher like struggling at home, especially somebody who's, he's played in Toronto the past 2 years and he's always had good splits at home. It's
Mhm.
just really awkward to see. And somebody like Kevin Gausman, who finished third in Cy Young voting last year, really struggle at home, led the league or led the American League in strikeouts last year. And, some of this could be due to, the injury trouble that he's had this year. Um, while being able to make every start, it's obviously something's up with him uh, on that side of the ball. But I think Kevin Gausman being traded, he's still an elite pitcher at his age, and he's still
Mhm.
on contract past this year for two more seasons. I think if the Blue Jays were to decide to move on from him at the winter meetings, they could get a haul for Kevin Gausman.
Yeah, like, don't get me wrong, he's the phenomenal pitcher, and I was campaigning for the Dodgers to trade for him, just given all of their pitching struggles, and obviously they walk away with Jack Flaherty, but yeah, you mentioned Gosman splits at home. He's played 11 games at home and 11 games on the road. The home ERA 6.39 even after that complete game, and on the road a 2.74 ERA, and he's actually thrown a third of an inning more on the road versus at home. So innings wise, the numbers, they're very similar in regards to the ERA. It's just opponents are batting 285 against him at home versus 225 on the road. And he's actually like the home run totals, it's 10 at home versus 8 on the road. He's given up 20 more hits at home in a third of an inning less compared to on the road. And, Gosman, age 33, maybe that's also what's kind of like deterring teams from trading for a guy like Kevin Cosman, just because when the new season starts, he'll be 34 years old. And are you really risking the farm system for him? I was saying the Dodgers should, just because I would have loved it for three more postseasons versus two. So now that the time continues to go on, the value for Kevin Gausman decreases. I think you could still get a top 10 prospect and maybe two or three in total within the top 25. But I think you could have maybe gotten two top 10 prospects if you traded him at this deadline.
Yeah, I really think, the Jays could have ended up moving on from, but they still, and news had just come out today that the Blue Jays are still planning to contend for 2025. Now, how realistic I think that'll be in the AL East,
With
uh,
the Orioles and the Yankees, I wish you the best of luck.
yeah, I have no idea how they're gonna end up, walking away with that one and trying to actually field a competitive roster next year. Um, but I still think that the Jays could have moved on from Kevin Gausman. They could have moved on from Chris Bassett, but
Hmm.
they only ended up really moving on from Yusei Kikuchi at this point. Um, and I think another reason for this is because of the injuries to the Blue Jays top prospects, like Ricky Tiedemann being injured. If Ricky Tiedemann was, in the rotation right now after that Alek Manoah injury, I think it would be a lot different.
I
But
was thinking
obviously,
that.
obviously him going through Tommy John surgery really pushed it back a year, I would say,
Hmm.
where the Jays are less likely to want to move on from any of their starting pitchers, knowing that, well, the one that we had waiting in the wings is recovering from Tommy John surgery, and Alek Manoah just got his brace off from his not it wasn't Tommy John surgery for Alek Manoah, it was like a brace procedure or something in his elbow. I don't know. They said he's expected to be back by next spring training, so that's at least something good for Alek Manoah.
Finally.
Um, but yeah, one other name, and this was kind of like a package deal discussed at one point where that I don't want to talk about is Garrett Crochet and Luis Robert Jr.,
Yeah.
where Garrett Crochet basically killed his market and said, I don't want to get traded because I'm not going to pitch in the postseason unless I get an extension.
Hmm.
And most teams were saying, well, I don't know if we're going to give you an extension. You haven't really proven anything, and you're a pitcher on the White Sox. Uh, like, yes, you played 13 games last year, then you missed tw all of 2022, and this is your real like biggest workload. And yes, you're a left-handed starter who's been an ace, but
Hmm.
I don't know if you're actually if they can trust somebody like who's this is his first real workload.
Yeah, and he's also coming off a major injury back in 2023. And, you look at it over 4 seasons, he's only thrown 191 career innings. Like, that's
Yeah.
not a large sample size. This is a guy that used to be a reliever, now turned starter. And you looked at his numbers as a reliever. I mean, he was really solid. I mean, he missed all of 2022 because of that injury. 2023 came back middle of the year later, towards the back end of the year, only played in 13 games. But in 2021, when he was a reliever, he was absolutely nasty. A 2.82 ERA, 65 punchouts, and 54 innings. And you look at it this year, 162 and 118 innings. He and Tyler Glasnow are basically neck and neck for expected ERA. We're at 2.56, and Glasnow's at 2.55 or something. The strikeout rate for Crochet, 34%. Obviously, he doesn't walk a ton of batters, but yeah, it's just like, and honestly, it was probably more his agent being like, I'm not like my client isn't going to pitch into October without a new contract. But I mean, the White Sox were doing everything in their power to try to trade him. He was only pitching like 4 innings each start, like 3 innings in his final four starts. I don't know if that also kind of was like confusing teams because then it's like, whoa, like what are we doing here? Like, is this guy all of a sudden a bulk guy? Like, you're telling us that you want all of this, yet you're limiting his innings so he doesn't get hurt. Like, it didn't make any sense to me whatsoever. It's an interesting situation. Crochet, 25 years old, he still has a few years left of arbitration. So I just don't get why they believe that he needed that. I don't get what it's up, but and then with Luis Robert, I mean, let's be honest here. He's been god awful over his last
Yeah.
30 games. I mean, the market was just it was mush for a guy like Luis Robert. And I'm so happy the Dodgers didn't trade for him or a team didn't bite because I was like, the way we're talking about this guy, I mean, he's so overrated. He is so overrated. He has a 690 OPS, yes, a 416 slug, but he can't hit the ball at all.
Yeah, with Luis Robert, it's power. It's not even like Kyle Schwarber power where it's like you don't really even care about the batting average. It's uh like last year he had 38 home runs and 80 RBIs, but it's with someone like Luis Robert, you're kind of stuck in the middle where he's not that great defensively, and he's not, other than the power, he's not really doing much offensively. Obviously, like right now, he's struggled the whole year. He's been dealing with injuries, and that's another thing with it too. He hasn't ever really been healthy.
Yeah,
The healthiest he's been was probably last year, where he played 145 games. And other than that, he missed a lot of time to begin this year. He missed a lot of time in 2022 and missed a lot of time in 2021. So when are we going to get a fully healthy Luis Roberts season that's worthy of some team, biting the bullet and making a trade for him?
yeah, and I mean to your point, when we want to compare Kyle Schwarber and Luis Robert Jr., Kyle Schwarber, he does strike out fairly bit, the strikeout percentage around 28%. Luis Roberts is 36%,
Yeah.
and he ranks like he's 37% whiff rate, 35% chase rate. And you look at Schwarber, I mean, yeah, he chases only at 20% of pitches. He's in the 93rd percentile in chase. Yes, he's in the bottom half in whip and near the bottom half in K, but he also walks at 17%, which is in the 99th percentile. The problem is, Luis Robert, the only way he gets on base is if he gets a home run at this rate. He only walks in 8% of his at bats. He's not a good hitter at all.
Yeah.
And
It's
he's a
one.
right-handed bat. I apologize for it.
No, no worries. It's one of the things where, you know, Luis Robert, he's not even that good defensively, and that's one of the things where, like, right now he has two outs above average, and that's his. He doesn't have good arm value according to Baseball Savant, and he strikes out a lot. He's just not a great bat to have in your lineup right now. Now, I don't know if that's you could even say a down thing for this year, but no, it's been a kind of a trend for his entire career at this point, where he hasn't been healthy most of the time,
Yeah,
and
you're
two,
just waiting for him to get injured.
yeah, and two, he hasn't really been that good at the plate, where he doesn't have good plate discipline. He doesn't hold the ball, doesn't hold the bat. He will swing at pitches outside a lot. And that's
Hmm.
one of the things where somebody like Luis Robert, now while the talent is there, he is 27 and he hasn't shown that he can stay healthy.
Yeah, I never understood the hype for Luis Robert. I know the White Sox wanted to package the two of them, but I feel like if one of the two were to get traded, it would be Crochet before even thinking about Robert.
Yeah. Moving on, we could talk about, we discussed a little bit about the Angels last episode where Luis Rengifo, Taylor Ward, and Tyler Anderson were all not traded at the deadline. Now, I think the Angels have to find a way to move on from them at the winter meetings. And I know it'll be harder for some players like Taylor Ward, and even Tyler Anderson too, but they need to move on from these contracts and just rebuild. Like
Mhm.
Tyler Anderson, while he has been solid this year, he hasn't really been solid. Like last year, he was atrocious. The year before that, 2022 with the Dodgers, he was really good.
Mhm.
But it's somebody like Tyler Anderson who's gonna be. We already talked about this with Gosman.
Mhm.
Tyler Anderson's gonna be 35 at the start of next year,
Yeah.
and it's one of the things where how long, how much can you really get for somebody at him at like for how much can you get for him at that age?
Yeah, I just like the whole thing with Tyler Anderson, what I'm guessing is just the fact that he carries an extra year on his contract. And you look at these contending teams like the Philadelphia Phillies, trading for Estevez, who's going to be a UFA at the end of this year. You look at the Dodgers who traded for Jack Flaherty, who's going to be an unrestricted free agent at the end of this year. Like teams really don't want to take on an extra year of a player's contract unless it's like in the arbitration stages, like a Tanner Beeks with the Phillies again, and like a Michael Kopech with the Dodgers, or even you look at a guy like Randy Arozarena with the Mariners. He's under arbitration. Jazz Chisholm with the Yankees. Like these teams that are trying to build for the postseason don't want these massive contracts. And if they want guys that have baggage on them in terms of like contracts coming up, it wants to be an arbitration. So That's just going to be a struggle for the Angels. I think it'll be easier during the winter meetings because then the team will just view him as the rental that he is, because it'll just be the final year of his deal. But then you look at a guy like Taylor Ward and Luis Rengifo who are going to be in arbitration still, and it's just like, they got like a year or two left of arbitration. How much are we willing to give up? And if we know that we're not going to be able to sign them, is it really all that worth it?
Yeah, especially, Tyler Anderson's never really been a velocity kind of pitcher. He's always been more of a location kind of guy.
Hmm.
His fastball velocity right now is 89 miles per hour, and that's kind of like not that good, not good at all. 89 miles per hour
The
being your
nice way to put
fastball.
it.
But obviously, location is what matters most, and if you can find the zone and make good pitches. But I just don't know if some team is really gonna would have really been looking to trade for him right now rather than
Hmm.
in the winter meetings as like you said, a rental pitcher that could fill up a gap in a rotation.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think it would be easier. I mean, you look at guys with arbitration years, still ahead of them. It's easier for that, especially when they have the more time on arbitration. But the Angels, they got a tough thing on their plate here because no one really likes Artie Moreno, and no one in the Angels organization really knows the direction that they're going in.
Yeah. Um, One last player I kind of want to talk about because we already discussed Elias Diaz and how, I thought the perfect spot for him would have been going to the Pirates.
Hmm.
But other than that, I didn't really see many other stops for him that would really have made sense.
Yeah.
Um, Cal Quantrill is a really interesting
Oh.
name where, you know, obviously playing in Colorado, your ERA is going to kind of balloon, but he's actually brought it down this past year. Last year was really bad for him, having a 5+ ERA, and obviously ending that after the year getting hurt near the end of the year was something that really sucked for Cal Quantrill, fellow Canadian.
Hmm.
Um, but with him, it doesn't really seem to make sense that he wasn't moved.
Hmm.
Uh, Granted that he does have another year left on his contract and or another year of arbitration eligibility.
Hmm.
I just think it would have made sense to move on for him this past year or at the
Hmm.
trade deadline, just because, the Rockies aren't good. Uh,
Yeah, to put it bluntly.
yeah. And honestly, I just think, Cal Quantrill's a guy that really could have fit a rotation. Now, obviously, a lot of his savant numbers don't look good. Like he doesn't generate that much of a K, doesn't generate many whiffs, doesn't strike out a lot of batters, doesn't get a lot of people to chase. But I still think compared to how what's it called, Tyler Rogers got traded for Connor Norby and Heston Kjerstad, I think some team could have looked at the extra year of arbitration eligibility for Cal Quantrill and could have made a deal. Now, I'm not saying he would have been for the same deal as Trevor Rogers getting the Orioles number 5 and number 12 prospect, but I think Cal Quantrill was a really interesting name that could have been moved.
Yeah, and I just don't think there was really a market for him. He doesn't strike out a ton, has a whip in the 1.4 range. What's a team really giving up, and is Cal Quantrill better than what they currently have on the roster? And we know the potential that Quantrill has. Maybe he just needs to get out of Colorado. I was surprised when the Guardians traded him because I thought he would have been fitting really well in that 4 or 5 spot on their rotation. And instead he gets to be like the quote unquote ace of Colorado. But I just don't know if there was necessarily just anyone really interested. I mean, only 92 strikeouts in 122 innings, from a left-handed pitcher, you'll be like, oh, okay. But from a right-handed pitcher, you're kind of like, ooh, like, what's going on here? It's not really the best numbers. And, over his last 30 games that he's played, just hasn't been good. He hasn't, I'm sorry, over his last 15 games, he hasn't been that good. A ERA near 5, a whip at 1.5. It's it's not great numbers. 61 strikeouts to 31 walks is not a good um strikeout to walk ratio.
Yeah. Moving on, we could discuss some of the free agents for this upcoming year. Now, obviously, some of the biggest names that are going to be free agents at the end of this year, Juan Soto and Corbin Burns are going to be two of the biggest names that people are
Yeah,
going to be looking at and waiting for, the amount of money they sign for and how long a contract will be. Now, Juan Soto, I'm not expecting Shohei money, but I could expect like around the $500 million,
future
range.
Dodgers.
That's something that I'm kind of expecting now. I'm probably expecting Juan Soto to eventually re-sign with the Yankees, although they haven't really led to people thinking that they will end up re-signing, even though I think it's all smoke by Juan Soto's camp. I think Juan Soto will end up re-signing with the Yankees, and I think it'll be in around that $500 million range. Corbin Burns is somebody interesting where people thought once the deal was made with Milwaukee that the Orioles would try and get an extension done with them. New owner, they're more willing to
Hmm.
spend, more willing to make deals. But it seems more and more like as this season is progressing, it's kind of a question mark where people don't know if Corbin Burns is going to end up re-signing with Baltimore.
Yeah, I don't know, but to first with the Soto, I mean, could he get like 550 million? Like, is that a possibility? I surely think it is. I mean, he and Judge are the only qualified hitters with an on-base percentage above 400 this season. You just look at Soto. I mean, what hasn't he done? He's already won a World Series, numerous All-Stars, numerous Gold Gloves. The Yankees should be all over signing him because let's be honest, outside of Judge and Soto, their offense is mush. It
Yeah,
is
it's anemic.
atrocious without those two. And I just think you need Soto in those pinstripes. And let's say if it's not New York, I guess if we want to throw out, maybe some hot takes here. Does a team like Atlanta go after Juan Soto? They're so smart with their contracts where no one is really making that much money. I know they're in like that third threshold area, but does Soler become your permanent DH next year and then you bring Juan Soto to play in the outfield? Like what do they do with Ozuna? There's a lot of questions there. You even look like a team like the Mets, Steve Cohen. We know that he's not shy about spending. And then when it comes to Corbin Burns, you're an ace. You're an all-star starting pitcher. There is a market, no matter what. There's going to be teams lining up to sign Corbin Burns. The Orioles, they have new ownership starting this, yeah, how they started this past season. Are they gonna first move gonna be a big splash where Corbin Burns, who's only 29 years old right now, signs a 6-year, $300 million contract or a 7-year, $300 million contract? It could be like that for him. I don't know, you look around the landscape of the league and you think, where could Corbin Burns end up if not Baltimore? And call me crazy, but I'm thinking in division, the Boston Red Sox make so
Mm.
much sense. They need starting pitching like now.
They need an ace.
They do.
The Red Sox don't really have an ace as we're like somebody who can strike fear into opponents. Their best pitcher right now is probably Tanner Houck. And
Yeah, and they thought Brian Bayo was going to be that for
mm,
them, but
yeah.
maybe you take the pressure off a guy like Houck and Bayo and you bring in Corbin Burns. And the Red Sox haven't really been known for spending ever since new ownership came. It's why they traded Mookie Betts. They didn't want to pay him the eventual 375 million that the Dodgers did. Could they now say let's attack a pitcher? Because I think, obviously they're in a very competitive division, but if they're even a wild card team with Corbin Burns, Tanner Houck, and Brian Bayo as your three starters, I mean, you're good as any other team.
Yeah. I think, with Corbin Burns, it would be really interesting to see, where he ends up at the end of this year. Obviously the talent is there. He's won a Cy Young and he's always been one
Mhm.
of the top pitchers across the league. With his strikeout numbers being down this year though, it's really been more of, how he can decide dissect the batter and find the right spots and get ground balls. And it's kind of a good transition for him at this point
Mhm.
where he can slowly transition into because strikeout pitchers are more susceptible to injury if you keep going for velocity. Now, while he still throws for velocity, uh being able to uh generate ground balls is something that's also really helpful. Um, one of the other starting pitchers we could talk, or not starting pitchers, free agents we could end up talking about is Alex Bregman. And we've discussed him before, third
Ooh.
baseman for the Houston Astros, where he could end up going. Obviously, he's only 31 years old right now, and there would be multiple suitors for third baseman
Mhm.
uh, across the major leagues, especially someone as good and talented as Bregman, where he can hit for power, um, and obviously he's a solid defensive player. That's one of the interesting things. And there's a lot of first basemen that are also free agents at this upcoming class. There's three really good first basemen that are all going to be available, and it's really going to be interesting to see which teams bid and which teams, kind of overpay for the first domino to fall. Pete Alonso, Paul Goldschmidt, and Christian Walker all being free agents at this upcoming uh in the winter is going to be an insane bidding war for teams.
Yeah, fire me up for that. And I don't know, you look at Pete Alonso, the more you look at it, the more I just don't think they're that he's gonna leave. Like I just think Pete Alonso is staying, but my God, is this free agency class absolutely loaded. And I've said this now for a couple of years. I just think Christian Walker is so underrated, and not just because he absolutely mashes against the Dodgers. And I really hope he gets the heck out of the NL West because, Lord, if you hear my prayer, please.
Future Padre now.
Yeah, but it's just his defense is above average. Obviously, we know what he does with the bat. He can hit home runs. He can also just hit for contact. And you look at him and Pete Alonso, I, I think Christian Walker is going to sign first out of those two just because I don't think his contract is going to be as large,
Lucrative.
yeah, as lucrative as Pete Alonso is. Like if I'm Christian Walker, I wouldn't be surprised if he got like close to 130 million, if he got like a big deal, like 5 years for 125, you give him 25 million a year. I don't think anyone would have a problem with that. You look at Freddie Freeman's AAV, it's around like the 27, 28 mark. I genuinely don't think Christian Walker is worth, even less, like that much less than Freddie Freeman. Obviously, Freeman's a more consistent player, but Christian Walker is really, really good. And he's definitely, I think it's fair to give him 3 to 4 million less than what Freeman gets. And with my fellow Jew, Alex Bregman, I don't know what the market really is for him. It'll be interesting to see if the Rockies trade McMahon, but I just think the direction that the Astros are going in, they got to re-sign Tucker. They're going to have to re-sign Alvarez. Bregman's the odd man out. Call me crazy. Does Bregman go to the Cardinals? Like Arenado's ending his time. I mean, obviously he's still a very solid Gold Glove defender, but I just think, just with his age, do you make Arenado a DH at this point? Do you bring in Bregman? Does a team like the Milwaukee Brewers, I know like Joey Ortiz has been playing second, third base. Does a team like the Brewers make sense for Alex Bregman? There's definitely a lot of options that are out there for him. I could also maybe see the Yankees. They've
Yeah.
already he's wanted to spend. Jazz Chisholm's most likely going to be in the outfield after Verdugo leaves. You need a third baseman. There's definitely possibilities.
Yeah. That's one of the things about this upcoming class where, three really good first basemen being available is something that's, you know, you never really kind of see three like of the top couple at a position all available at the same time, unless it's like pitchers. But you never really see like this kind of, stacking of one position. Um, Another you discussed about Milwaukee. One player from Milwaukee that's going to be a free agent is Willie Adames, and that's going to be interesting to see
Hmm.
what his market is. Obviously coming into this year, people thought he was going to be a trade candidate because of
Hmm.
uh, you know, him not really in the same timeline as the Brewers while um, trying to get value for him and trying not to lose him for nothing. And
Hmm.
he's been elite this year, so far 19 home runs, 75 RBIs, uh 782 OPS, and still really good defense at the shortstop position.
Hmm.
it's really interesting to see, where Adamas might end up by the end of the year or at the end of the winter meetings.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. I'm looking at his numbers right now. I mean, this is a guy. Last night I think it was he hit 2 home runs,
Yeah.
4 hits. If you're the Brewers, you got to do everything to keep him. Adames' market is gonna be very, very aggressive. I mean, you could count numerous teams that would love to have a shortstop of his caliber. My beloved Dodgers are interested in a
Mhm.
shortstop. Um, I mean, you even look um, just at teams around the league. This is a big, big market for Adames. I wouldn't also be surprised. I mean, he's definitely going to be $100 million player. I just think if you're the Brewers, you can't let him get to free agency.
Yeah. You're not messing with Ahmed Rosario at your shortstop?
Oh yeah, I'm messing with Ahmed Rosario at shortstop. But I just
Yeah.
think like for a guy like Adames, like the market is gonna be uber, uber aggressive for him. And I just think, there's just gonna be a lot of teams out there for him. Could maybe the Guardians go after a guy like Adames? Like I know they have Andreas Jimenez, but he's also kind of played second base as well. Like does Adames Jimenez, and then you have J Ram and Naylor. I mean, that is just one heck of an infield. And
Yeah.
then in the outfield also has power. You have David Fry behind the plate. You have the other Naylor, both the
Bo
Naylor
Naylor.
brothers. You got Bo and Josh. I like the Guardians are interesting because I think they can actually just be so under the radar, especially with a guy like Corbin Burns. With Shane Bieber, their starting rotation is really getting carried by the bullpen. I think the Guardians, they might be willing to spend some dollars here.
Yeah. I think with a team like the Guardians, it's really interesting to see where they will end up spending their money because small market teams are less likely to spend their money.
Hmm.
Um, and it's really interesting to see because they're putting up a good team right now while they're struggling right now,
Hmm.
in the dog days of August. It's really interesting to see where they will end up by the end of the year because they have such an insane bullpen and they one of the things that they kind of need more is better starting pitching depth. They're starting Carlos Carrasco and they traded for Alex Cobb, but their defense is already elite. Steven Quana in the outfield
Hmm.
is an insane talent, and
Yeah.
their infield so far, and they traded for Lane Thomas too to play
Hmm.
to shore up that center field. Um, it's just really interesting to see where the Guardians will end up spending that money that they have.
Hmm.
Um, One of the last free agents I kind of want to talk about, Blake Snell. Now, there were
Ooh.
some discussions about him being traded at the deadline. There were teams like the Yankees. I even think the Padres, uh, there was discussions about them possibly bringing back Blake Snell for the second half of the year. Obviously, he's been elite recently. His last two starts, a 15 strikeout game, and then he follows that up with a no-hitter.
Never
Like,
heard of him.
especially, he had never gotten out in the eighth inning before.
Well, he's
And
never gone into the ninth.
yeah, he never went into the eight or like
The ninth. He's never gone into the
oh
ninth
never
inning.
I thought he said he never got through 8 innings.
Oh,
Like
no, I thought it was like in his 200 career starts, he's never pitched into the ninth inning.
I know it was never into the ninth, but I thought it was he never completed eight. Like I thought
Oh, I don't know. I could be wrong here, but I don't know.
let me see. It doesn't matter. To follow up a 15 strikeout performance with a
Yeah.
no-hitter, that's like unheard of.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
somebody like Blake Snell who obviously won the Cy Young last year, but his numbers where he led the entire league in walks the year before, or the year that he won the Cy Young. It's weird to see that obviously with Scott Boras being your agent, you're not really gonna end up he didn't really end up with a good contract because was Boras was looking for his client to get paid and
Yeah.
teams weren't really, sure of what he could do. I think after these last two starts, and if he can keep this momentum going, obviously he kind of wants to kill Scott Boras right now because he killed his market and
Yeah.
made him not really get into spring training and get into a groove and kind of ended up, hurting his value at this point. I think the last two starts showed what the peak of Blake Snell could be, and I
Hmm.
think teams at this in free agency could be more willing to spend on him.
Absolutely. And you look at a guy like you look at his stats and you look at what he's done, he's been absolutely incredible. Again, it's just like, what is that contract looking like? And I just think for a guy like Blake Snell, I wouldn't be surprised if it's like a 2 year, $70 million deal. But I just
Hmm.
don't think a team wants to do the player option. And that's just the one thing that Scott Boras really wants his clients to have is the luxury of the player option. But it's just Snell's in his mid 30s is a team, I wouldn't be surprised if a team even went 3 years, 100 million. I think that's definitely fair for a guy like Blake Snell, who, I mean, is second half Blake Snell. Fire me up for it.
Yeah.
And I just think, it's just that Scott Boras has to understand that this isn't a Juan Soto he's dealing with where he could pry teams for like a 12-year, $550 million contract. It was a pitcher in his mid 30s who, yes, was coming off a Cy Young. And Blake Snell did say that, look, the Yankees 150 offer was baloney. But you can't tell me that a team didn't offer close to like 120 or 110 for him.
Yeah. It's just one of the things with Blake Snell where his own value got killed by Scott Boras, like waiting long to make that deal. Um, and it's one of the things where hopefully at this free agency, they're more willing to, you know, get rid of that player option and just take a straight up deal.
Yeah.
But with Scott Boras, you'll never know. Moving on, we're gonna quickly discuss some of the wildcard teams in the NL. Now, the NL wildcard race is a dogfight right now. There are so many teams vying for postseason, just the postseason, where the Mets, the Diamondbacks, the Padres, the Cardinals, the Pirates. There are legitimately you could even try and include like the Cubs. I don't know if you really could, but um there are legitimately almost six teams that could be vying for a postseason spot right now.
Hmm.
Uh and there's not many spots available, obviously, with the wild card only being three teams. What are some of your thoughts on some of the teams that could, like who do you predict to fill in the wild card spots in the NL?
Well, obviously the Padres. I would think Padres, Diamondbacks, the way that they've just been playing as of late. And the third team is a toss up really between Atlanta, New York, and Pittsburgh. I don't see the Cardinals. They're 3 games back of the wild card right now. The Pirates are just a game back of the Cardinals, but I don't have that much faith in the Cardinals and the Braves. I mean, my Lord, the Braves. They've been outscored 17-0 in their last 2 games. Like the offense is just so anemic. I just don't have any faith in them. As is it crazy to say that the Braves aren't going to make the playoffs? Like, is that crazy to say? I don't really have that much faith in this team. I don't know, but I think the Diamondbacks, I'll say it again, the Diamondbacks, the Padres, and the Pirates, those are the 3 teams I think end up in the wild card.
I think the Braves end up making it just by the skin of their teeth. I think they've obviously been struggling and they have like the worst BABIP in the league where they should be playing a lot better. Like they should be getting more hits, but they just aren't. And it's so on to see where they're one of the hardest teams at hitting the ball, but they
Hmm.
aren't getting results for it. And obviously the injuries have killed them. Michael Harris, Ronald Acuna, Ozzie Albies,
Yeah.
where three of their top performers have all been out due to injury and two of them out for the season almost.
Hmm.
Um, it's just something so and their pitching depth too with Spencer Strider's out for the year. They recently Reynaldo Lopez, one of their most consistent pitchers, also
15
just
day.
went down on to 15-day IL. It's
Hmm.
it's kind of the season from hell for the Atlanta Braves, and I really, as much as I want to say they don't make it, I think they will end up making it by the skin of their teeth, like in the slightest of margins. I think they'll end up making the postseason.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I saw this stat that that with Sale, Freed, and Lopez on the mound, the Braves are 47-31. And then they're like 13-24 with anybody else starting. And just given the injuries to guys like Max Fried, and now you're talking about Reynaldo Lopez hopping on the 15-day IL, I don't see a way that the Braves can hold this up. And Albies, they said he was going to be out 8 weeks, but that was a nasty wrist injury. And I know like
Yeah.
Mookie Betts broke his hand and now he'll be back within the next week or two. Your beloved Max Muncy is in Cabo. I don't know where. There's an APB out for Max Muncy, but I
He got a
just
back massage, you know. He was
yeah. I don't really know if the Braves have what it takes. They've gone through so much and the pitching has just not been able to be sustained.
yeah, it's such a dogfight in the NL right now where it's so close and I it's so weird to see this many teams vying for this for these spots, and it's one of the things where the expanded postseason has really, you know, led to more teams wanting to buy and wanting to add to the deadline. I don't think the Pirates would have bought and,
Mhm.
you know, traded for Isaiah Kiner-Falefa or Brian De La Cruz if they didn't think they genuinely have a chance to make it into the postseason. And I don't think they do that if there isn't the extra wildcard spots.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's just a matter of Jared Jones coming back from that lat injury. He was supposed to be back like last week or so, but if he's not back, then I don't think the Pirates, but I think the Pirates, the Braves, and the Mets are the three teams that are vying for that final spot.
yeah. Um, Moving on, we'll talk about pretty quickly. I'm just gonna give you a question, and I just want you to give you your best answer. You know, which team has the scariest three-man rotation come postseason time? Now, the Dodgers, the five teams listed are the Dodgers, Phillies, Padres, Mariners, and Twins. Now, in my own opinion, I think the Mariners have the deadliest three-man rotation. You know, you have Luis Castillo and you
Mhm.
have George Kirby, and George Kirby has been so good this last like this whole year. He never walks anybody, and it's so like refreshing to see. Like 15 walks in 136 innings. That's so insane to see. And last year, 19 walks in 190 innings. Like you never see this at all.
Yeah, this Mariners rotation is deadly. I just thank God. I said it last week, but like, just thank God the Dodgers aren't in the American League because does anybody really want to go up against what is like a quintuplet of talent? Luis Castillo, George Kirby, who doesn't walk anyone. And then you also have Brian Wu. I didn't even mention yet Logan Gilbert. I
Yeah.
like any of these guys, I would be confident in giving me 6 innings in a quality start.
Yeah. Their entire rotation at this point is like under an ERA of 3.6. And that's something insane where your entire rotation is putting up elite stuff.
Mhm.
And it's something you never really see. I think the Mariners are my choice for that.
Absolutely. And it's just like the way that they're able to now add offense with Justin Turner and Randy Arozarena. And then if Julio Rodriguez comes back and then he gets into his normal self, now you're talking about one of the more complete teams in all of baseball. I threw the Twins in there as an underdog just because I think, they have Pablo Lopez at the top. Bailey Ober is also in that rotation. They got some sneaky guys who could put up 8+ strikeout games in the brightest moments. And I just think, you obviously have the top dogs like the Phillies, the Dodgers, all the top contending teams that you would expect. But I just think an under the radar team is the Minnesota Twins with their starting rotation.
Yeah, the Minnesota Twins are very underrated, and it's one of those things where when they make if they end up making the postseason, and right now currently they're slotted to be in that position, uh, you know, more of a question is going to be the offense. Like, where are they getting that offense from? Because I believe the pitcher, the starting rotation for the Twins is elite, and I think they have a very deadly three-man rotation as well. Um, it's just their offense. They have kind of like Carlos Santana at 37 years old is kind of carrying this team. Not carrying, but he's one of their key contributors. And a lot of the guys that they were expecting to, you know, take a second step, like Edward Julian, they've been really bad when they've been up in the big leagues, and it's
Hmm.
kind of hurting them.
Yeah, but I still think like there's always that one team, and and I understand like guys like Edward Julian have not really, been what they were expecting, but Byron Buxton has just been tattooing the baseball as of late. Have you
Yeah.
seen his numbers over the last 30 games? He has just been exceptional, and I just think the way he's heating up, and it's about heating up at this time of the month. And just with that Lopez, Ryan, Ober, Chris Paddock, whatever. But it's just even the offense, and you have Johan Duran to close things down. But They're definitely suffering with injuries at this very moment in time, but I just think get this team to October, and I just think they could be really, really sneaky.
Yeah. One last little tidbit we'll go before leaving. I'm gonna give you, do you think Otani becomes the sixth 40-40 player in MLB history? Obviously 40 home runs and 40 stolen bases.
I mean, he's certainly on pace for it. Some people are even like, could he become a 40-50 guy? Could he steal 50 bags? And I'm like, there is 2 months left to baseball. It's definitely a possibility, but
Yeah.
I absolutely think so. What is it? 32 stolen bases to 34 home runs. It's exceptional what he's been able to do. And I just absolutely think that he will be the sixth person in MLB history to be a 40-40 man. And just add one more thing to what's already a Hall of Fame resume.
Yeah. And speaking of stolen bases, how many stolen bases do you think Ellie De La Cruz reaches by the end of the year? Like he's at 58 right now. Do you think he gets to 80? Do you think he gets to 90?
God, I mean, if he gets to 90, that would be insane. I can't remember what his most in a season were, but I just think no doubt does Ellie De La Cruz reach 80 stolen bases. It's just incredible watching him. And I remember it was with Jeff Passan. Jeff Passan asked Ellie De La Cruz, who's the most exciting player in baseball? And Ellie said, you're looking at him. And then that very same day proceeds to go 4 for 4 with two doubles and two home runs. And all four of those balls were hit over 100 miles an hour. I mean,
Yeah,
this guy
it's
is just otherworldly. He strikes out a boatload, but forget that. I'll take the punch outs to see this guy run around the bases and hit home runs.
yeah, it's some really great stuff from Ellie. And I think he gets to 80. I don't know if he ends up reaching 90, but I just love watching Ellie play.
Hmm.
But yeah, that'll just about do it for this episode of Breaking News Bears. I once again want to thank my co-host Evan Davis, and I want to once again want to thank you, the listener, for listening. Uh, we'll discuss more about the MLB season next week. Thank you once again for listening.